One of the things that I'm going to talk about, and the focus of everything we're going to say, is actually unexpectedly right in here, one of the problems that I have with how we are being presented and how we present ourselves. I wish Karen was still here because I would like to have pointed that out to her. She made a factual inaccuracy, and it's even right here. It says, hearing on a bill giving illegal aliens driver's licenses. That is not a fact. That is untrue. And just by presenting our issue that way, we're actually setting the stage to fail. Because the fact is that this bill is not about illegal aliens. That's a smokescreen, and we're falling right into it. And so, like I say, Chip had asked me to come and pretty much say what I had said at the hearing. So since what I said was 2.5 minutes, I'm going to give you my presentation, and I want you to notice the style in which I used. I started off by saying, let's talk truths today. I have 3 of them. Truism 1, most people prefer to live in a relatively safe world. Truism 2, untested and therefore unlicensed drivers risk public safety. Now it's because those 2 truths coexist, they came together to spawn a bill called the Safe Drivers Bill. And actually, the official name is an act relative to safe driving. Now that's a great name, and it would seem like what rational, reasonable person of a sound mind could argue against that? Well, I am of a sound mind, and that's because I'm of a sound mind is why I argued against this bill. This bill is seductive only if you read it real fast and don't pay attention to what it really says. The siren song playing in this bill is a sales pitch about improving public safety, because that's what they keep pushing, public safety. And yet there's not one provision in the bill that actually addresses public safety. However, what the bill does do is that it makes it easier for criminals to get driver's licenses. Emphasis plural on licenses. They can get multiples. Because this bill actually says that if you want a driver's license, but you can't or won't produce a social security number, or a, what was the other thing there? Produce a social security number. Birth certificate. Okay, produce a social security or birth certificate. You don't need to worry about that. No problem. That's what the bill says. And remember back when the pitch was from home ownership several years ago? Remember how risky mortgages were granted? They were granted by avoiding a fundamental question. Can you verify your income? That was the question they avoided. And the question that's being avoided in this bill is, can you prove that you are who you say you are? And so by avoiding that, it's like the pharmaceutical drug companies, when they pitch their drugs as their solution, at least at the end of the ad, they list all the complications and side effects that will kill you. But the thing is, the sponsors of this Safe Drivers Bill, they don't talk about the side effects. So that means that you have to use your own common sense, and you have to use your own critical thinking. And basically, this bill is such a reckless giveaway of a privilege. And remember, driving is a privilege, not a right. And so, because this is such a reckless giveaway, it just makes it easier for anyone, and I do mean anyone, to perpetuate fraud and conceal their identity. And this is a public safety issue, but that's not how it's being presented in the bill. This bill ought to be renamed a bill to encourage identity fraud and crime. Lastly, it's no secret that it's incredibly expensive to drive here in Massachusetts. And does anybody really believe that an exploited people, let's be honest, illegals are exploited, can work for substandard wages and can afford the cost of doing it right, like buying liability insurance? And finally, truism number 3, just because something feels good, sometimes you still should not do it, and that is why I did not support and do not support this bill. So basically, that was what my presentation was. The Safe Driver Bill was being framed as a conversation about illegals, and that just adds to the smoke screen of what the topic is, because that whips up people's emotions. In reality, the bill is about not illegals gaming the system, but criminals gaming the system. But when we talk about it in the context of illegals, we're falling into their trap. Because the thing is by making it about illegals, we become the bad guy, because the conversation isn't about driver's licenses. The conversation actually becomes about compassion and how can we not feel for other human beings. And that's how we lose. Legislators, they like and they need to have an enemy that they can appear to joust with, because that enhances the public's perception that they are protecting the people from the bullies. And let's face it, conservatives are a great enemy to have, because it's easy to paint us by using a paint-by-numbers recipe to have people picture us as heartless, bigoted, racists. And once that image is planted, no one cares or even listens to what a conservative has to say. So the best tool that we have to fight this, and we never use it, we don't do it, is hypocrisy. Because nobody likes a hypocrite, not even a liberal. Legislators are even less moved by principles. I had somebody, as an after conversation of the hearing, say to me, I would like to get some experienced, great accountants and financial economic experts to testify to the legislature to convince them that this is a bad idea from a financial sense. And I responded back to him saying, legislators, they don't care about principles and logic. In fact, in reality, they don't even care about liberal principles either. The fact is they only care about an issue as to how does it help them get reelected, and how does it help them leverage power over someone else, which will then help them get elected. So the fact is and Chip was a perfect example of this. He gave testimony of how he went to the Rio Grande and reported on his experience. And the chairman of the committee dismissed it by saying, well, that's just an anecdote, because I happened to be there this summer also, and I was pulled over 2 times by the INS. Well, the thing is that chairman didn't bring that up to refute what Chip said. He brought that up to dismiss anything that Chip may have said. Because it's not about talking about the fact, because the fact of the matter is, every single person knows that the border is not secure, including the chairman of that committee. But he doesn't want to talk about that because that's not what the point is. So the fact of the matter is that, ultimately, we've got to keep the pressure on, because this hearing, like all hearings, this is a great lesson. This hearing was actually, as like they all are, not to gain facts, like they say. They say, oh, we're on a fact-finding mission. We're getting on. They already have their mind made up. They know anything that was presented to them. They already heard. They already know. What this is, what all hearings are, is an opportunity to see how many people turn out for it, to find out how emotional and vitriolic they are, and equally important, to find out who the players are. Watch out for this guy. Okay? And that's what the hearings are all about. So when we give testimony, the key is not to present the facts in a cold way. The facts is to talk through the legislators, to talk through them to the people around. Because after I gave my presentation, I spoke to an illegal who couldn't wait to talk to me afterwards. It was a very interesting conversation. But the fact is...
I'll bet.
But the point is that he realized in my presentation that I was not talking about illegals, which meant I was not necessarily talking about him. So therefore, he was comfortable to have a conversation with me, and I could ask him the point-blank question, which I did, is, great. What about the people who are doing it right? What's your answer to them? How is this proposal fair to them? And he couldn't answer the question. The best he could do was to say, I don't know, I guess it's kind of tough. I asked him, one of the questions I asked him, he was brought here by his mother. He came here when he was 4 years old. I said to him, shouldn't you be mad at your parents? And he looked at me like he'd never even pondered that question, and finally said, no, man, I love my parents. But the fact is we've got to make them question these things and see it for what it is. It can't be us against them, because it is a problem. Anybody driving without a license is a problem. And that's what needs to be spoke about. So at the end of it all, you know, the emails going around, John O'Mara, Jessica Vaughn are encouraging everyone to contact their legislators, because eventually what we're hoping for is that this committee will send this bill on to a study, which we all know that that's code for never to be heard from until other people just bring it up again. But that's the best we're hoping for. But that doesn't change the fact that they could bring it to the floor, which then all of our legislators need to hear about. So the last thing that I forgot to bring up that I wanted to was the very beginning, the way that the hearing started. The chairman of the committee said, "These are the rules. Do not break these rules. There will be no laughing, no jeering, no farting, no burping, no." I mean, he was just, you know, he was very clear about that.
At that point, you threw Len out of the room, right?
And then he said, "And there's no signs and no T-shirts with writing on them." Remember that? Now, those of you who were there, remember that?
Yeah, they made the exception.
And then he said,
T-shirts, but we're going to make an exception
Well,
today.
we're going to make an exception.
To the 100 people that were there with the T-shirts.
They were all throughout the campus, everywhere.
So I did bring pictures. Unfortunately, I didn't realize they're projecting images here. So I had pictures of the T-shirts and the room full of white T-shirts. And there was one woman, I forget her name, standing next to me with a picture. And the Nazi there, who was inflicting the rules on everyone, the henchman, went over to her and said, "No, no, 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 no." And then while the hearing's going on, they actually had some words back and forth. And then, again, I had a picture of what the room was, which was the legislative section, where there's two doors for a special class of people, which is them, the government class, and then everyone else. And so he took that woman in through that door, and they disappeared for a couple minutes. And I was like, "Oh my God!" I said, "Gitmo, where she came back, and she still had her sign, and she kept it the whole time. The picture of Matt Denise, the boy who was killed in Milford by an illegal. But the point was, she had to fight for that. I don't know. I can't wait to track her down and find out what transpired through the door.
She was offered a government job.
Chuck, you're gonna have time for questions.
Yeah. What's that?
Time for questions.
Yeah. So, but that's how the meeting ran. And so, if you had questions, I can do my best.
Way up back, who's asked? Dean?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chuck, excellent job.
Chuck.
We've talked offline about this many, many times, that we have to play to emotion. That the people that we've run against aren't interested in facts. They're interested in placating and playing to their limited, targeted, special interest audiences. I wish the communications director for the Mass GOP was here, because she has to take your course in how to articulate our issues. And then when you wrap it into what Ed's talked about, you have 15 seconds at someone's door to get it out of your mouth. I just wanted another bullet, if you have one off the top of your head. A bill for identity fraud and crime. Perfect. Just like Common Core. Common Core is the Obamacare of education that's going to set Massachusetts back. And in this election, it's imperative that we use these wedge issues to our advantage, that we take Chuck's course on emotion and framing issues correctly, because this election's coming down to 2 to 3 to 5 percentage points in 10 communities in urban centers. So I just wondered if you had another bullet at the top of your head, and thank you for the presentation.
Okay. Jack?
What has been the experience of this particular issue in other states? I understand in California they're allowing illegal aliens to have licenses.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that a negotiation occurred so that they tightened up the bill to make it more palatable. I don't know what that meant for what they use, sugar or poison, I'm not sure which. But to make it more palatable, they tightened up the rules for it to appease it, and now the illegals are complaining that those additional identification requirements are an imposition on groups of people who don't want that to be shown. So,
Larry?
that's good.
What provisions, sir, I'm Larry Schreibler from Framingham. What provisions are there for local police forces to enforce the use of having a legal license? In Framingham, we had a police chief that went out of his way to not enforce the regulations.
Well, unfortunately, that's what I mean when I talk about the government class. I'm working on a letter to a piece that I'm writing on about there were two distinct classes of people at this hearing. And the way I'm gonna lead you up is to believe it was classes of poor people versus affluent people, but no, the two classes were the normal, regular people and the government class. It was very clear to me, all the subtle messages that were being delivered about how we are not worthy. We work for them, not the other way around.
Yep, the question you had, yep.
When this typically stupid Massachusetts piece of legislation passes, when will I then be able to go down and get my false driver's license? Because it might be useful. What do I have to do?
I don't know that answer, but I'm sure it'll be forthcoming. I can only say this, at 2 years ago in Milford, the governor did a listening tour, and one of the members from my Hudson Town Committee asked him, and it was awesome. Tim Roche asked, "Excuse me, Governor, would you do me a favor and give me a full list of all the laws that I'm allowed to ignore? Because I'd just like to be able to navigate the system properly. No disrespect, I just want to know which ones I can ignore." And the governor went like this.
Yeah.
"I see what you're doing." And then he went on his, how you have no compassion and we have to think about and blah, 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 blah.
All right, Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for the insight of the reality of the bill. And Karen had alluded to it. When the quote-unquote progressives lose, they come right back. And they keep coming back, and then as soon as they win, well, let's move on, nothing to see here. And conservatives are never very good at putting a wooden stake through the heart of any particular issue. You know, we kill it for a little while and then it resurrects itself as soon as the full moon comes out. And, or Democrats get reelected. I guess the question is, this sounds like the perfect issue for letter writing, for massive letter writing, because it's presenting it and particularly renaming it as Dean did, you know, for the so-called, you know, Safe Driving Act is really an identity theft, a bill to encourage identity theft.
That's his line.
Yeah, okay, okay. But if and I will write a letter, but if people would write letters, we might finally have a wooden stake to put the thing to death.
As long as there are different peoples in the world, they're going to see things differently, and they all have their own agendas. Some of them are not altruistic, but the fact is that if we can expose hypocrisy at every turn of the road, and that includes even in our own Republican candidates, make them confront it. That's how they'll toe the line, and it's not because of any real concern, but it's just that they don't want to look bad. One last quick story.
The way to drive a wooden stake through it is to have politicians lose elections over the issue.
Well, that requires a lot.
That's what's happened with
Well,
gun control.
it influences, but it still comes back. But let me just give this one last point. My first job was as a mechanic at a Ford dealership, and the owner's son used to play practical jokes on everybody in the dealership. He took a bite out of a guy's sandwich. He sprayed the stuff that smelled like real crap on around where a guy would work, so it smelled like there was a load around there somewhere. I mean, he just did put fish in a guy's toolbox on the weekend. But one of the mechanics said, "Hey, how come you never do anything to Chucky? How come?" And we're all standing there, and the owner's son says, "Because Chucky would come to me and ask me, 'Why did you do that to me when I've never done anything to you? When I've always been positive and helpful, why would you do that to me?' And quite frankly, what would I say that wouldn't make me look like an a-hole?"
Yeah.
And I went up to him and I said, "Oh my God, you know me better than I know me, because that's exactly what I would do. I would confront you on why you would do this and make you look like the a-hole that you are for doing it." And guess what? He never played practical jokes on me because he knew it just as well as I did. And that's what we have to do with these politicians.
Yep.
So.
Thank you, Chuck.
What's the bill number?
How's 3285?
3285?
Yeah, I think that's it, Ted, right?
3285.
3285, yeah. Last month I passed out a sheet which had that number on.